Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to have an interactive session with what is a surgeon point of view with respect to rehabilitation in ACLR cases, and what is a physiotherapist questions or views with respect to orthopedic surgeon view. So for today that we have none other than Dr. Sunny Google, who is a consultant orthopedic surgeon at Sancheti Institute for Orthopedic Rehabilitation. Sir has done his residency from Sancheti Institute for Orthopedic Rehabilitation itself, and he specializes in knee surgeries. Sir has also done fellowship in arthroplasty and arthroscopy. Sir is serving in Sancheti Institute for around 15 years, and he also has many publications under his name. So now we are going to go about it. So my
Thank you so much.
the voice is cracking.
Series.
So your voice is cracking.
Sir, we think that there's some internet connectivity issues from your end. Please, can you look into it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty okay. The internet looks stable to me. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So thank you so much, Yash, for getting me on board. And I would like to inform you all that this would be a very good interactive series. Many questions that they come when we discuss many things. So Yash is being a physiotherapy with us. He is doing a lot of sports work. And this is a topic which is very close to me about ACL reconstructions in elite athletes. So we'll go through the series of questions, and we'll try to see that we cover all the major points in brief. So thank you, Yash, and you can start the interactive session.
Thank you, sir. So my first question to you is, in high demand pivoting athletes, what factor most strongly influence your choice between hamstring graft, bone patellar tendon bone graft, and quadricep tendon grafts?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Yes, so every elite athlete, when it comes to us for a ACL reconstruction, his basic thing in his mind is when and how early he can get back to active sports. And to answer to this question, we have to always keep into mind certain things when we suggest him specific graft option when we advise ACL reconstruction. So specifically in high demand and pivoting athletes, I would definitely go as a BTB as my graft of choice, because bone to bone healing is very faster. The recovery of the patients is very quick, and within around 8 to 10 weeks, we can allow them to go back to a little bit of more aggressive sports, and then by around 4 to 5 months, we can get back to them active sports. So BTB is my preferred graft of choice. But certain patients who have a kneeling activity, wrestlers, where kneeling happens quite often, in such patients, BTB donor side can be an issue as a morbidity. So there I would be a little skeptical. Otherwise, second go graft option is going to be a quadriceps tendon graft, because it's a very thicker graft. And there is very minimal donor side morbidity, because nowadays we have minimally invasive harvesters available. So it can be harvested by a minimally invasive way. And even quadriceps tendon grafts is also preferred for reconstructions in elite athletes. Hamstring grafts is my last option to go whenever I deal with elite athletes, because soft tissue to bone healing is really, it takes a longer time for the graft to incorporate into the bone, and then later on for the patient to get back to physical activity level. So that is what my sequence would be when I suggest a graft option when I deal with the patients in elite athletes.
Thank you, sir. Very well answered. My second question would be, regarding the grab choice only, do you modify it with respect to a female athlete who has considerably higher chances of getting ACL re-injuries or as well as injuries? So if you do that, if yes, how?
So graph choice in female athletes. So usually, as I mentioned earlier, what would be my graph choices? So in female athletes, usually Indian athletes, they are very not very tall in height. So usually average height is around 5'8", 5 feet 3 inches or something like that. And in such patients, hamstrings are going to be very thin and very short in length. So if and combined diameter of hamstrings, if it is less than 8, I'm not very happy in such situations because thinner grafts are usually more chances of ACL re-tear and other issues are there. So I usually go to graft is going to be a quadriceps graft or a BTP graft in such situations. Quadriceps graft is a very thicker graft, and usually even if you have thin, tall statured, short statured females, the average graft thickness is around 9 to 10 millimeters. So I would always go for quadriceps graft in female.
Thank you, sir. My third question would be, with the current emphasis on anatomical ACL reconstruction, how critical is the femoral tunnel placement in restoring rotational stability compared to the graft type? So generally, we don't have surgical knowledge about it. So could you please
Yeah.
elaborate that?
So absolutely, this is a very deeper dive into the surgical technique. And tibial tunnel usually there are no much of variations in the tibial tunnel placement, but femoral tunnel variations are very often, and it totally depends on the technique of femoral tunnel placement that you make. So we usually avoid transtibial femoral tunnel. We usually do transportal technique for the femoral footprint for ACL reconstructions. And as you mentioned about the anteroposterior stability is always taken care of with a ACL reconstruction, which is done anatomical, non-anatomical. But what is lacking in such patients is the rotational stability. So rotational stability of the knee joint is going to come only and only when your femoral footprint is proper and it is in anatomical position. So if you are aiming at your femoral tunnel to be as posterior as possible and in the anatomical ACL footprint of the femoral side, then only you are going to restore that biomechanics of the knee joint, which will give you a rotational stable as well as anteroposterior stability of the knee joint. And then only these patients will be happy and satisfied and able to go back to the active and pivoting sports. Otherwise, usually if you see them on examination after some few months, they are Lachman wise they are negative, drawer wise they are negative, but pivot wise they are positive. So the pivot shift really become doesn't get void even if you have done a ACL reconstruction when your femoral tunnel placement is not proper. So definitely I would aim at very well posterior placed femoral tunnel, but at the same time there are a lot of technical tips into it. We should avoid the blowout of the posterior cortex. We should avoid blowout of the distal cortex. Usually, if you tend to go as far as posterior, then you need to have a deep flexion. So it's a challenge when you're dealing with obese patients because you really can't get deep flexion in such patients, and it becomes a task. But then we usually tend to err more on the posterior side when we're doing a femoral tunnel in ACL reconstructions.
Thank you. So that was very well explained for a initial who has not studied that much. So my fourth question would be, do you feel that double bundle reconstruction still has a role or has refined single bundle anatomy?
Yeah, so double bundle, there was an era when double bundle was in vogue. So Dr. Freddie Frew from US, he had introduced this double bundle concept, and it really was in why it really gained a lot of popularity then because then it was giving very good stability. You are achieving a broader footprint across the femoral side as well as the tibial side. Broad-based graft, thinner grafts were also a good option then. But then there were a lot of technicalities into it, and it really did not pick up. And I myself personally believe that there's no major role of a double bundle ACL. When you have your anatomical tibial and femoral tunnels placed properly, then I think that should suffice whenever you are dealing with in elite athletes, because otherwise double bundle the issue comes is that your femoral tunnel coalition is very often and you don't tend to get in exact ideal position where you want to be. So that's my take on double bundle ACL reconstruction.
Thank you, sir. So my fifth question would be like when we see MRIs, when we given ordered for investigation to do an MRI with ACL or many concomitant injuries, we also see bone bruises. So
Yes.
do you feel untreated bone bruises influence long-term cartilage health, and should rehab progression reflect that?
Yeah, so again, this is a very eminent thing which is very popular. And mind it that the bone bruise that happens, it's an indirect marker of a direct cartilage injury. That means the cartilage over the bone is not very healthy, or that cartilage is also impacted. Usually you can pick out a bone bruise on the MRI, which can be very well seen on a T2 weighted image, but what you're going to miss is the cartilage grading or cartilage severity of the injury. So such patients you have to be very careful. Usually post pivoting injuries of ACL or meniscus tears, you have massive bone marrow edema in the entire femoral and the tibial condyles. Usually the lateral posterior femoral condyle or the lateral tibial condyle is the area where you see these bone bruises. And if so, then we usually tend to defer the ACL reconstruction in such patients till the time the edema subside, which is usually around 3 to 4 weeks, by medications, by rest, by icing, by restricted activities. So that is the thing that we have to be definitely keeping in mind. If you have ignored that bone bruise at that point of time, and if you have allowed the patient to do a lot of activities when the pain is less, within one few days the pain goes down, and then the patient start doing a lot of sporting activities, climbing up and down stairs, skipping, jogging, jumping, running, and this bone bruise can become really bad at times. And if the bone gets necrosed completely, then the cartilage over it is at risk of complete injury, and you usually tend to have these patients going into osteochondral injuries at a later stage. So bone bruises should not be ignored, and they should be very well kept in mind, and should be thoughtful when you're planning any ACL or a PCL reconstruction in such patients.
So, my just additional question to that would be: is there anything intraoperatively that orthopedic surgeons can do for it, or
So bone bruises, we usually it is a concussion or a contusion to the bone. So you don't have to do anything major surgically. Rather, this is dealt with preoperatively only. Very rarely, if a patient has a chronic area of necrosis or a chronic area of bone infarct, usually which is seen on serial MRIs at 6 weeks or 3 months interval, then in such cases we advise antegrade or retrograde drilling of the bone in that area, like we do for AVN of the hip joints, and that is where we stimulate the vascularity in that area and allow that bone bruise or bone marrow necrosis to get recovered completely. Otherwise, nothing much usually we do when we are doing arthroscopic ACLs for these bone bruises. But we certainly wait for a period of 3 to 4 weeks when you are seeing a massive bone bruise in this area. In spite, even if the patient has full range of motion and it's a quiet knee, we would still like to wait for 3 to 4 weeks and then go in for our ACL reconstruction.
thank you, sir. My next question would be: in combined ACL and MCL injuries, what guides your decision between conservative MCL management versus surgically repairing an MCL?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question usually, and very oftenly in athletic individuals, we see a lot of combined injuries. So it's very rarely an isolated ACL tear or an isolated PCL tear. It is usually a combined injury. Either it is a posterolateral complex, or it is a anterolateral complex, or an anteromedial complex. So MCL is a very important part of such injury, and valgus strain on the knee joint leads to this MCL tear, where it can be graded in 3 grades. Grade one which is a minor, just a sprain of few fibers of the MCL. Usually these patients have tenderness on the MCL, but the knee doesn't buckle up on the medial side, and the valgus stress test is negative. Grade 2 MCL injuries, where you have more than significant amount of fibers of the MCL which are involved or partially torn also, but the intact fibers retain that integrity of the MCL and there is a good recoil. And these two set of patients where there is a grade 1 or grade 2 injury, I would consider for a non-surgical treatment. I would go conservatively, brace these patients for a period of a month's time, let the MCL heal up completely, let the edema subside completely, go on for a rehab, go on for a knee range exercises, get the knee function back to normal, and then I'll pitch in my ACL later on. Versus now a grade 3 MCL tear, where it is a complete avulsion of the MCL from the femoral side or the tibial side, and these patients, they don't tend to do very well, especially in athletic individuals. And then in such patients, I would plan up for a combined stage 1 itself ACL reconstruction along with open MCL repair of both the sides. Yeah, now it totally depends on the quality of the MCL tear. So if the MCL is torn and the fibers are very shredded intraoperatively as well, then I'll not hesitate to augment my MCL repair with a graft. Either it should be a semi graft, or I would even use a fiber tape augmentation of my MCL repair. Otherwise, these MCLs, they do really well when they have done in grade 3 also, and whenever they are managed with conservatively in grade 1 and grade 2 as well.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very well answered. Uh, So this was the end of the part one of interaction with orthopedic surgeons, getting view of what orthopedic surgeon has a point of view with respect to rehabilitation and what a physiotherapist have and have questions regarding ACL surgeries. So be tuned for the part two of this series. Thank you.